Welcome, Ivan. So in this lesson, we are going to have a look at the speaking tests in Cambridge Book 11. So if you're doing general or academic, both categories, right, you can have a look at the speaking test because there's no difference in the speaking test. Now, as you know, there are 3 parts for your speaking test. Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3. And each book has 4 tests, so we are going to have a look at all 4 tests, right? Now, Part 1, this part of the test begins with the examiner introducing himself or herself and checking the candidate's identification. It then continues as an interview. In the interview, the examiner asks the candidate about him or herself, his or her home, work, studies, and other familiar topics. So let's have a look at the first Part 1 topic, food and cooking. So I'd like to go through each question individually. What sorts of food do you like eating the most? Well, I like eating spicy food. Apart from that, I love eating pizza and pasta. And the reason is, I don't know, I just love the flavor. That's the reason I would say. Who normally does the cooking in your home? So if my mates go on holiday, it's myself and my husband. We both get involved in cooking. If not, on a day-to-day basis, my maid cooks at home. Do you watch cookery programs on television? Well, not really. No, I don't watch any cookery programs on television because I don't have the time. But if I was to make something new, like a new dish, I would definitely go online and search for the recipe. In general, do you prefer eating out or eating at home? Generally, I prefer eating from home. The reason is we know what ingredients go into the food and it's fresh and I like it. Alright, so moving into Part 2. The topic for your talk will be written on a card which the examiner will hand you. Read it carefully and then make some brief notes, right? So you will have to talk about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes and you have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say. You can make notes if you wish. At the end of your prep time, that is preparation time, the examiner will tell you, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this. So don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please? Right, so let's have a look at our card. This is the card that we have. Describe a house or an apartment that someone you know lives in. Should it be our house or apartment? No, it's someone that we know. But it should not be ours. Whose house or apartment it is, where the house or the apartment is, what it looks like inside, and explain what you like and dislike about this person's house or apartment. So you can make notes if you wish. Right, so I have put these up for me to understand, right? And making notes does not necessarily mean that the examiner should understand those notes, right? Okay, so I'd like to describe an apartment which my friend lives in. Her name is Tasuni, and she lives in an apartment in Havelock City, which is just around Havelock Road. Well, the apartment looks really nice. It is a 3-bed apartment and it has quite a lot of space, right? And they have a kitchen, 3 bedrooms, 3 attached bathrooms. They've got a kitchen, pantry, and a living area. They also have access to the pool and the gym, which is a common area. But there's also like a rooftop area where you can sit down and relax. And the floors are all wooden and the entire apartment is air conditioned. She also has private balconies for each of these rooms as well as a main living room. Now, apart from that, the interior looks really nice. The rooms are being painted in different colors and each room has a unique theme, which is quite nice. Now, what I like and dislike about this apartment is I love the view and the easy access, obviously, because it's down Havelock Road. It's really easy. And apart from that, it's easy to maintain because it's an apartment and it's got the wooden floors and the space is not big as a house, but you have space to do all your things. It's quite easy. What I don't like about the apartment is that, it's a bit cluttered because it's an apartment and because it's AC always. I feel a bit claustrophobic because it's always closed. And then it's a bit isolated, right? It's not like you have neighbors who talk to you always. Once you come into the building, you're kind of isolated. No one talks to each other. And, everyone's just closed their doors and they're inside. So I feel it's kind of isolated. Right, so this is what I feel. You can pick and choose what you want to talk about. You can talk about a house if you want. Now, moving on into part 3, we're going to talk about different types of homes and finding a place to live. So let's talk about different types of homes, right? What kinds of home are most important in your country? Why is this? I think single detached houses are really important in Sri Lanka because having a house, people consider it as a prestige. Whereas some people also own apartments, or we call them flats, and they could own some of the apartments which are high-ended, which are really expensive, and that could also be popular. What do you think are the advantages of living in a house rather than an apartment? Well, I think when we live in a house, we have more space and we always tend to have a garden, you have more privacy and, you could invite people, there's more space to enjoy and relax. Whereas in an apartment, you would have about 1,500 to 2,500 square feet, which could be a little cluttered. And might find it difficult to find space to relax and to, grow vegetables or fruit or for your gardening. Do you think that everyone would like to live in a larger home? No, I don't think so. The reason is people have their own preferences. Some people have busy lifestyles and they don't want a big house. They'd rather live in an apartment which is much smaller and easier to maintain. Let's talk about finding a place to live. How easy is it to find a place to live in your country? I mean, looking at places which are quite urbanized, example like Borala, Colombo, might be difficult to find places to live and they could be really expensive. But if you're moving out of Colombo, it could be easier to find places to live. Do you think it's better to rent or buy a place to live in? It depends on how people see this. If you don't want to own anything, then staying on rent could be better. But lots of people in Sri Lanka like to own a house. The reason is you don't have to pay rent in the long run, which is a waste of money. So I personally think having your own house is better than renting. Do you agree that there is a right age for young adults to stop living with their parents? Why is that? Again, this could be cultural. I personally think that there should be an age. Some of you could disagree with me, right? I personally think that there should be an age where the adults, young adults, move out. Because they need to take responsibility of their lives. They need to understand how hard it is to earn, and they need to pay for their bills. So I believe once they get a basic education like the university, or when they enter university, they could then move out and start living on their own. Right, so now we have a look at test 2. In this part of the test, we begin the test by, having a quick chat with the examiner. The examiner introduces him or herself and then check for the candidate's identification, and then it continues like an interview where the examiner asks questions from the student about familiar topics. So let's have a look at the topic friends and the questions individually. How often do you go out with friends? In the past I used to go out quite often, but now I think we go out with friends probably once a month. Because all of us are working and we don't have the time to meet up as we used to. Tell me about your best friend at school. So my best friend's name is Irasha, and I met her in 1996. So she's a really nice person. She currently works as a doctor in the National Hospital of Sri Lanka, and she's got 3 kids. She is a really friendly and nice person. She's looked out for me ever since I was her best friend, and I adore her quite a lot. How friendly are you with your neighbors? I'm quite a chirpy person, so I'm quite friendly with my neighbors. We spend time together. Sometimes we go on trips. We bake things together. We have dinners. I share dinner with them. Sometimes if they cook lunch, they send it over. So I'm really a friendly person. Which is more important to you, friends or family? I think they're important. Both groups are important, but I find family more important because no matter what it is, they'll be there for you through thick and thin. So I feel family is more important. Right, so let's have a look at part 2. And here you will get a card. Describe a writer you would like to meet. Right? Who the writer is, what you like to know about this writer. What you know about this writer already, what you would like to find out about him or her, and explain why you would like to meet this writer. Now a tricky question. If you don't know a writer, at least talk about your mother as a writer. So don't worry, make up a name and talk about it. And say that he or she writes Sinhalese books, right? Okay, so don't say I don't know about a writer. Never ever give that answer. You have to answer according to the question that you get. I'd like to describe a writer that I would like to meet, and this person's name is Innie Blyton. Well, I don't know much about this writer, but I know that she is a writer and she writes children's books. She's written many books, right? And Crybabies was her first book. That was not the truth. Okay, so some things you'll have to lie, because if you don't know, you'd have to say something in this, right? So Apart from that, I know she's written a lot of books for children about Mr. Medal. She's got series of books, and her books are quite famous and they're quite nice to read when, considered the kids, it's quite nice to read. What I would like to find out about her is I'd like to find out more details as to why she became a writer, and what books are her favorite books, where she lived, right, and a bit more about her personal life. Why I would like to meet this writer is because since a kid I have read so many books by Enid Blyton, but I've always wanted to see, how does she actually look in real life? So I would really want to meet this writer. Okay, so you could come up with any writer who you know, right? Martin Wickramasinghe, or any person that you think is important, right? So we're moving into part 3, where we talk more about reading and children and reading for different purposes. Let's have a look at the questions separately. What kinds of books are most popular with children in your country? Why do you think that is? Well, I think English as well as Sinhala children's books are quite popular here in Sri Lanka, because children love reading in Sri Lanka generally, and it becomes quite habitual for them. Why do you think some children do not read books very often? I think it's just their personal liking and disliking. Some children naturally don't like to read, and apart from them, if some of them can't read, they can't put the sounds and the words together, they would not want to read. How do you think children can be encouraged to read more? I think parents should make it a habit. You should always have a reading time in the night. Sit down with your kids and read from a very young age. If you do that as an habit, they will automatically get used to reading during the night. And I see this, for example, my ones, I used to read with my eldest son, and now he keeps on reading. So the 2 younger ones are quite small, but they know it's their reading time, and they go and they enjoy when I'm reading a story for them, right? Reading for different purposes. Are there any occasions where reading at speed is a useful skill to have? Yes, especially at an exam. If you're doing the IELTS reading paper as well, it could be quite useful. Apart from that, at university or at school, if you're doing reading papers, reading comprehension, quite useful. Are there any jobs where people need to read a lot? What are they? Yes. If you want to be a doctor, you should read a lot. Journalists should read a lot. Presenters should read a lot. Teachers need to read a lot because they need to keep themselves updated and they need to pass exams. So reading is important. Do you think that reading novels is more interesting than reading factual books? Depends on the circumstance. Sometimes I feel reading novels is good, especially when I want to relax. But sometimes if I want to learn something, then probably reading factual books would be more important for me. Alright, so we're going to move into test 3. Alright, so we're going to begin with part 1, and let's have a look at the questions. So we're going to look out for the topic photographs, right? Photographs, it's called photographs, right? So please pronounce it properly. Let's have a look at the questions. What type of photos do you like taking? Well, I love taking natural pictures, especially with the ones that have scenic views, right? I don't like taking portraits of people for some reason. What do you do with photos you take? Usually I save them. If it's really nice, I share it on social media. If not, I usually just save it on my laptop. When you visit other places, do you take photos or buy postcards? I've never bought postcards, to be honest. I always take photos because I find that quite interesting and I love doing that as a hobby. Do you like people taking photos of you? As I said, I don't like, people taking pictures of portraits. I'm not a very photogenic person, so I don't like photos being taken. And now we move on into part 2, right? Describe a day when you thought the weather was perfect. Where you were on this day, what the weather was like on this day, what you did during the day, and explain why you thought the weather was perfect on this day, right? Now remember, in part 2, what happens? You will have a minute or two, right? So roughly about 1 to 2 minutes to talk about the topic. You will be given 1 minute to prepare yourself. You can make some notes to help you if you wish, right? When your prep time is over, the examiner will tell you, all right, remember you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please? Okay? Right. So here, I'd like you to try this on your own, right? I'll quickly run through a few points with you so that test 4, you can do it on your own, right? I'd like to describe a day when I thought the weather was perfect. Well, I was in Hikkaduwa on this day and the weather was amazing. It was sunny, but it wasn't really hot, nor was it really cold. It was a perfect weather where it was sunny and nice, but not too hot to sweat and burn. So on this specific day, I actually went to Hikkaduwa to relax. So we went to see the coral reefs. We went on a boat ride and then we came back and I sat down and I relaxed. I read a book. I went for a swim. I also went to see the reefs. So we actually went for scuba diving, and Hikkaduwa is one of the other places, the second best place to go for surfing. So I also went on surfing for a few minutes. Why I thought the weather was perfect? Because it wasn't too hot. I wasn't sweating, but I loved the sunny weather because it makes me feel happy and cheerful. So it was, sunny, but it wasn't really hot, and that's why it made it perfect. Okay? So you can talk about things which you want to, right? Now moving on into part 3, we talk about types of weather and weather forecasts. Now if you can't remember or you don't know, you need to go back to the beginner level and see. I've done vocabulary and lessons around weather, okay? Right, let's have a look at the questions individually. What types of weather do people in your country dislike the most? I think here in Sri Lanka, we don't like the rainy season because it's quite muddy and it's difficult to travel. So I think people don't like it. What jobs can be affected by different weather conditions? I think if you are a fisherman, definitely that would affect you, right? And if you're doing any sea, the sea sport activities, or if you're doing any activities around the beach area, that would definitely affect you. Laborers, the weather would affect you. If it's really hot, sometimes you can't work. Are there any important festivals in your country that celebrate a season or type of weather? I think in the past there were some agricultural festivals that were celebrated based on the weather. So if it was the rainy season was about to come, there were some festivals celebrated. But apart from that, seasons we don't have in Sri Lanka, so we don't celebrate anything. Let's talk about weather forecasts. How important do you think it is for everyone to check what the next day's weather will be? It is quite important, but unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, people have very less trust towards the weather forecast, because if they say it's raining, sometimes it doesn't, and people have lost interest. But abroad, I would say we rely on it quite a lot, and it is important because if there are storms or there are things that we need to know, then it's important we watch out for it. What is the best way to get accurate information about the weather? I think it is through the weather forecast. How easy or difficult is it to predict the weather in your country? In Sri Lanka, it's quite easy. We have a straightforward kind of weather forecast. Most of the time, we are a sunny country because we're a tropical country. And in certain specific parts or months of the year, we have the rainy season. All right, so we're coming to the last test, okay? And as you know, we've got part 1, part 2, and part 3. So let's have a look at part 1. We're going to have a look at the topic names. How did your parents choose your name? I think my parents just chose it like randomly. In Sri Lanka, we have this naming ceremony, and they give you a letter. Some people actually tell other people to find names. I think my mum and dad, they got the letter S, and everyone in our family starts with an S, so she just gave me my name. Does your name have any special meaning? I'm not quite sure, but I think it means soft, as I know, but I'm not really good at that. Is your name common or unusual in your country? I think it is quite common. Lots of people have my name. If you could change your name, would you? No, I wouldn't, because I love my name. My parents obviously gave me that name, and people have known me with that name for a long time, so I wouldn't want to change my name. Let's go on and have a look at part 2. So in this part of the test, you will get a specific card, and you will have to speak for 1 to 2 minutes, and you will get 1 minute to prepare. So during that preparation time, you can make some notes if you wish, and by the time your preparation time is over, the examiner would tell you, all right, remember, you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please? Right? So here, you have to describe about a TV documentary you watched that was particularly interesting. So it's not just a TV program, a TV documentary, okay? What the documentary was about, why you decided to watch it, what you learned during the documentary, and explain why the TV documentary was particularly interesting, okay? So you could talk about something you like. I remember watching a documentary done by TV Dharana, which was, I'm not promoting either one, okay? But I need to talk about it because I need to be specific, right? So they were talking about the prisoners in Kandakadu, and this was quite interesting. They were doing a complete documentary as to why people were in that specific place and what kind of facilities do they provide, because all of these people were drug addicts, and how do they change the lifestyle of these drug addicts. So I thought that was a nice documentary, okay? So you need to pick and choose things that you watch and talk about it, right? So I just gave you a hint. If you don't know about TV documentaries, you're not sure about it, please go online and Google and see other TV documentaries and talk about whichever one you want to, okay? Right, so moving on into part 3, you'll have to talk about different types of TV programs and TV advertising. So let's have a look at these questions individually. Talking about different types of TV programs, what are the most popular kinds of TV programs in your country? So in Sri Lanka, I don't think we have a variety of TV programs. more or less everything is either teledramas or entertainment. So I think the most popular types of TV programs are the ones which are there for entertainment. Do you think there are too many game shows on TV nowadays? I would say in Sri Lanka we don't have a lot of game shows on TV, so I wouldn't say that we do have quite a lot. So you can elaborate on it. If you think there are a lot of game shows, please do talk about it. I don't know much, so that's why I would give an answer like that. Do you think TV is the main way for people to get the news in your country? What other ways are there? So I would say a large population in Sri Lanka watch the television, especially the news, prime news times. Everyone is in front of the television. Apart from that, I would also say a few people actually buy the newspaper to see what's happening in the country, and the millennials or the younger generation would go online and read the e-newspaper. TV advertising. What types of products are advertised most on TV? I think they're more or less consumer goods that are being advertised on television, because consumer goods have competition in the market and they tend to advertise more. Apart from that, the whitening products are quite, popular in Sri Lanka. Everyone wants to be white or rather fair, so they advertise these kind of products as well. Do you think that people pay attention to adverts on TV? Why do you think that is? A certain age group, they do pay attention to the adverts on television, but I think as you become older, the older generation pay less attention to these adverts. Lastly, how important are regulations on TV advertising? Now, I think in Sri Lanka, we tend to ignore some of these facts, right? And some of these products that are actually being advertised, I'm not sure if people they've actually tried it, right? But they get in actresses or people who actually even don't sometimes use it to talk about it, right? So regulating these advertisements, I think, need to be thought through carefully in Sri Lanka. Sometimes taking children, it has come to that level where they tell children, oh, come and talk about this, whereas some of those products might not necessarily be really good for the kids. So I think in Sri Lanka, we need to regularize the TV adverts that are being published, and especially because a large audience is being targeted, we need to be careful and it needs to be regularized more. Right, that is just my thought. And if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. You can give that answer, okay? This is not about agreeing or disagreeing. This is only a speaking test, right? So if you want to bring out your views, that's perfectly fine, but make sure that you do it properly using the language as well as the grammar, okay? So I think we've had a look at 4 tests, right? And we had a look at different topics. We were looking at TV adverts, about weather, about TV documentaries, about photographs, reading habits, writers, okay? We were also looking at different places to live, different places to buy, about houses, about apartments, about cooking, right? So lots of topics covered in the 4 tests. And with that, we've had a look at all the 4 tests in Cambridge Book 11.